This is how to define your brand and reach your audience. It's nice to see some returning faces, recognise some of you here. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kate Turner, project officer on the Digital Stories project, along with Belinda. We're really delighted to welcome our expert hosts for today's session. We have Emma Armstrong, who's founder of brand design studio Curate Your Curious. And we have Emma Richmond, who's the Research, Communications and Engagement Manager at the University of Manchester. Before I hand over to them for their brilliant presentation, I just want to flag up that there will be a breakout session where you'll be able to turn on your microphones and have a bit of a chat about your ideas. And there'll also be a Q&A session at the end. So there's lots of opportunities to interact and get involved. Belinda and I will be fielding questions to line them up for the session at the end. So if you have any thoughts as you go along, just pop them in the chat. I'll mute myself now and hand over to Emma and Emma to begin.
Hi everyone, it's nice to see so many people. So Emma's just going to share her screen and share our presentation. We're going to roughly split this in half. So the other Emma Armstrong, is going to roughly take the first section around branding and building your brand, and I'm going to speak a little bit more about communications, but we are going to tag team as we go through and chip in as we go along. So the session, as Kate said, is how to define your brand and effectively reach your audience. The main purpose of this session really is to give you a bit of an insight into some basics of branding and marketing, and to give you a place to get started from when you're looking at building up your brand presence, particularly online. We've focused on digital channels. So we'll talk you through the session, as I say, it's roughly in two halves, roughly looking at branding first and then looking at the marketing side. So I'll hand over to Emma.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Emma. So as Kate nicely said, I'm the founder of Curate Your Curious. It's a design studio focusing on brand design and website design, but previously for the last 8 years I actually worked for the National Trust, 6 years on 2 major multi-million-pound projects as their senior project coordinator and then project curator. So I've got lots of experience in terms of how you go from ideas all the way to fruition for different exhibitions, projects and big capital works, things that really need to try and engage multiple stakeholders from very, very different backgrounds.
Fab. And just before Emma takes over, I'm the other one. I now work at the University of Manchester in research communications. That's working directly with academics to promote their research and reach out to kind of targeted stakeholders, policymakers, industry, general public and media. But prior to that, I met Emma and Kate when I also worked for the National Trust and led on the marketing and communications for the Quarry Bank project that Emma and I were working on at the same time. So I do have experience in the heritage and charity sector as well.
Okay. So as everyone sort of said, the whole point of starting in this way, and when we started to come up with how we wanted to present this, it was really clear that everyone needs to get their foundations right. You really need to have a solid background and level to really be effective when you're trying to speak to your audience and try to market your audience. So that's why we're starting with brand today. So I wanted to just show you this in terms of a roadmap that we'll be looking at. So we'll talk about our foundations, our communications plan, how you then develop that into messaging and content, key channels, the pros and cons of different ways of talking to your audience on social media and other digital platforms, and then how you can look at that in terms of results. So we're going to start off with branding. Now, branding is a term that gets thrown around quite a lot and used quite a lot. You may have heard of brand identity, branding, brand strategy, visual identity. There's lots of different ways that people talk about it. But basically, it's just the visual elements and the non-visual elements that make up your brand. So it's what makes your business stand out from the crowd. And there's different ways of looking at it, like I said, from a visual and from a non-visual element, and we'll go through that today. So what I wanted to get started with is just to try and get you thinking about brands. So it is about a perception. It is about how you perceive something. So when you look at something, you have 7 seconds and you decide whether it's for you or not for you. And that can be done in a multitude of ways because we're very visual people. So I chose these 2 examples just because you know that we both worked for the National Trust before. But basically, I want you to have a think about what these 2 logos mean to you. Logos are the basic epitome of the visual standard of your brand. So the Museum of London, they really try to connect with people and the lived experience in London, the history of London, how people have shaped London. It's about interaction, it's about evolution. And they want to be at the beating heart of London's cultural, educational, international activities. They're really at the pinpoint of everything that's going on. So when you look at their logo, you see the capitalization of the font. That can sort of show authority, strength, and purpose. It really, really stands out. But then they've got all these layers of colours, which can think about the layers of life in London, the layers of different people who are living in London. And also it has that ebb and flow to it, which can be kind of seen as like that beating heart again. So you can kind of get a sense that from knowing sort of who they are and what they want to do, how that can sort of be turned into a visual representation of what they're trying to say. And again, with the National Trust is a bit different. So they've been going for 125 years. They've actually had the oak leaf emblem as their main logo since 1935. Haven't had a rebrand in terms of that, but they have updated it in terms of colours and things. But so the National Trust is here to protect and care for places and nature so that everyone together can thrive. It's about that balance. It's about a balance of nature, coast, countryside, treasure houses, collections, people, histories, social histories, all of that. So actually the oak leaf represents a key symbol of that English heritage. And actually a little story for you, in 1935, they actually went out to do a bit of a brand competition and asked people to come up with some designs for them based on key sort of English symbols of the time. So there's a lion, an oak leaf and various other things, and this is the one that they decided to go with. But you can sort of see that it becomes a part of our sort of national heritage because it's been around for so long. But it has, again, that symbolism of, you know, from small acorns, mighty oaks grow. It has perseverance, growth, continuity, stability. And again, they've updated it with different bold colours. So again, if you go on their website or things, you'll really see these core brand colours of greens, purples, blues, again, to show that vibrancy and that they're sort of in different pockets of things that are going on. So what I wanted to do by showing you that is actually you can get quite a lot of information just from those things, from the font you use, from the colours that you use for how you decide to do your branding or how you want to have your website. So there's a lot of things that you can think about in terms of colour theory and research, and just have a play around and really get to know who you are. So what we're going to talk about next is brand strategy. So we're going to go through some of the questions and some of the process that you can think about when you are thinking about your brand foundations, and not just from a visual sense, from a communication and messaging sense. So building a brand, as I said, is about how your audience perceives you. How do you want to come across to the people that you're trying to connect with? You want to build a brand that is going to make people care about you, to be interested in you, to want to follow what you do, to really want to pay attention. So in order to do that, you need to get really clear on your mission, your ideal audience, the benefits that you are going to provide for that audience, and then the message that's all filtered down into that core message that you're trying to give to people. So I'm going to actually go through some questions here. Don't worry, you're going to get these slides, so you can go through them at your own pace. There is quite a lot here, but it will really give you that sort of starting point when you're thinking about those foundations. So one of the first things that you need to think about is your why. So why do you do what you do? So what is your mission? What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to start a conversation? Are you trying to start a series of activities to get your collection out there, to educate people through this collection, to start those conversations that spread out into multiple different avenues that take your business and your museum or wherever you're coming from to that next level? Are you really trying to inspire people? Have you got some really amazing collections that really fit in with what's going on in the world today and you really want to inspire that? Is it that you want to raise awareness? You know, we're all in this point where we're all in lockdown again. We really want to raise awareness of what we're doing, what we stand for. We may want to be doing fundraising, all those type of things. But you really need to get clear on why it is you do what you do. Hope that makes sense. We'll be doing questions at the end. So after you've really thought about what that is, really want to get clear on who you do it for. So have you heard the phrase, if you market to everyone, you actually speak to no one? By being really vague and just saying the general public is my audience, you'll never be able to drill down into actually who you're talking to and how they consume their media, their content, how they like to interact with people, because someone may love being on Twitter, another person may love being on Instagram. That's very basic, but it's just if you say you're going to market to everyone, it's actually not going to work for you. So you really need to have a look at breaking your audience down into different groups. So there is an audience mapping exercise that you can do, and there's tons of support for this online. The Audience Agency are a really great website to help with this, but the 4 main areas that you can start to look at when you are thinking about your audience are these 4 here. So number 1 is behavioral. So what you want to think about is, who's your current audience now, if you have one? How do they normally like to interact with you? Where do you see the most give with them? So do they normally like to just visit you? Do they interact with your images that you put out? Do they really open your emails that you do? What is it that really connects you with them, and how do they normally interact with you? The next big one is demographic. So you really want to, as I said, with general public, you really want to split them down. And you don't just have to have one group, you can have multiple audiences. But again, if you're clear on those, that makes it so much easier to say, right, I'm writing this content for this age group, or I'm writing this content for another group. So really have a think about the brackets of your audience. So with your demographics, think about their age, what life stage are they in, what are their sort of circumstances that they're working under, what careers are they in, all of those type things. And they sort of blend down into attitudinal, which you'll see just below. So what are their interests? What do they like doing in their spare time? Is it something that you're providing that is a really big area of interest, and they spend their leisure time, doing something that you're working with? Are they really, warm to you? Are they warm to the sector that you're in? Are they really interested in the sport or the collection that you have? And how can you sort of fire them up? How can you inspire them through the content that you have? And then the last one is geographical. So again, when we say you're marketing to everyone, that can be the whole world. Now we're online, you can connect with anyone, anywhere. So again, for your organization or whatever you're doing, really want to be clear on how local or how international your audience is. Because with things like Google and search engine things, there are so many brilliant things you can do if you have a really local audience, through using some of the tactics on Google that really help your local audience find you locally. And again, there are other things that we can do if you've got a really far and wide spread out audience. So can you see, by having to drill down into the people that you're hoping to attract or are currently working with you, that it actually really makes a difference on how you market yourselves or how you think about your communication plans. There are very different ways that you can talk to people based on all of these audience mapping elements. So what me and Emma highly recommend is, if you go onto the audience agency, they have some really great tools here that in your own time you can really go through and really start to list out those different audiences that you think you might have. And they also have an audience finder, which is a great little tool which will really help you get clear on that audience for you.
Emma, can I just jump in for a sec? I just wanted to add a couple of points, because I completely agree with everything you've said. And I think the other part of audiences is that they can also be aspirational. So you might know at the moment that you really speak to, that you might really speak to an older audience, and you might have aspirations to branch out into a family bracket, or vice versa, or any which way around. And I think if you can identify not just the audiences that you have, but the ones that you want, you can then start to target them specifically. Whereas if you're just thinking to yourself, actually we'd really like to reach out to, so I know there's people here who are looking at particularly around the Japanese Olympics later this year. You might really think, actually, we have a very local audience, but we really want to make the most of that Japanese connection, and we really want to actually try to reach people in Japan. How the heck do we do that? And kind of taking some time to really map out your audience and to try and understand those audiences and how they work can be your route into that. And the other thing that I wanted to say was that understanding of your audiences, and particularly the demographics, can really change how you communicate with them. Not just length of those communications, we'll come on to kind of longer and shorter forms of communication later, but also things like time. They can be really simple things. So for example, when I was at the Wildlife Trust, at Warwickshire Wildlife Trust, we were reaching into that family bracket, and we had a lot of programs for toddlers and young children. And we used to send out our messages on social media at sort of 2, 3, 4 in the morning, because if you have a baby, that's when you're awake, and that's when you're scrolling through your social media board while you're feeding your child. So there can be really simple things that come out of mapping your audiences that just give you the opportunities to reach out and get to know them better, and make sure that your communications are working for them and for their lifestyle and for how they go about their day.
Yeah, completely agree with all of that. There's things that I see in my sort of line of work now where a lot of people say don't necessarily write all your content for the sort of organizational person that you are now. Be ambitious and post the content of who you want to be in the future. Don't wait, be aspiring to be the best that you can be, and try and find those ways, like you say, Emma, to target those new audiences, or be that sort of authority or that inspiration that you want to be. Right, so back to some more of those questions now. So now that we've sort of talked about that mission, your why you're doing what you're doing, and you're starting to really think about those audiences that you have and how you want to communicate them, you really want to get clear on, so why have you actually chosen that audience? Why are they your target audience? Why will they care about what you have to do or what you have to offer? What benefits will you give them? Why will people want it? And get really clear with that. Again, really write down and really come up with sort of a mission statement of why they should know that. Because again, when you know the benefits, and if you've got a list of those benefits, it makes it so much easier then to link your content back to that, you really want to think about what you are writing should really connect to the people that you're trying to target through the benefits that you provide. What is it that's going to make them go, oh yeah, that's really interesting, that's great, oh, I want to find out more about that, oh, I want to visit that. What is it that is going to attract them to you? It's like I say, make that list of benefits that will really help you when you're developing your key messages and your content.
That can be really hard as well, I think, because we all, you know, we, especially in the heritage sector, I think everyone's in it really for the love and because they're really passionate about the collections and about what you do, and it can seem really obvious to you of why someone should care, and it seems like a really harsh question to say, well, so what, why do I care about this? But it's being able to take yourself out of your current situation and put yourself in your audience's shoes and understand why. And it might be that it connects to their daily life, it might be that it connects to their hobbies, it could be all sorts of reasons why they might engage, but they're not automatically bought in the way that you are, and it can be really tough to take yourself out of that mindset, but it's such an important process.
But the other thing you can do is include them in it. Even if you're not actually reaching your target audience at the moment, find out why you are connecting with your current audience. Make them part of this journey for you. You could, if you choose to, be really open about that you are, you know, really looking at this and really want to provide that better sort of content and experience for those visitors. So do a poll, you know, send out some questions and really have that engagement. I mean, one of the main things that we want to take away from this is that it isn't one-way traffic in terms of communication. You're
Absolutely.
putting things out there, but have that conversation. It's social media for a reason. It's supposed to be that sort of two-way engagement, and people might be really interested to give you their feedback and their thoughts. So as Emma says, you don't necessarily have to be sitting in a room on your own thinking, oh my god, how do I find out what these benefits are? Talk to people, talk to each other. You know, we're all this community together. Have a think about where you do connect, or what makes you different and what makes you unique. But yeah, don't feel like you have to do this all on your own, and things will change. You know, as you get more activities or you do different things, those benefits will shift and they'll grow and they'll change, and that's a really exciting point. So yeah, don't get too bogged down in being perfect at the start. Everything is evolution, everything sort of changes as the way you work changes. Okay, and we can pick this up in the Q&A as well. So the next element, which kind of links to that in terms of that community feel, is what are other people doing? You know, we're not talking about copycats or plagiarizing anything, but how are other people in your sector, in your area, in your sport, in your type of collection, what are they doing, and how are they engaging with their audience? Are they doing some really interesting things on, you know, Instagram or Twitter or something? What can you take away that you think would really work with your audience, or again could work to attract that audience that you do want to attract in the future? So the point is probably again is you're not on your own as well. Just have a think and talk to them, you know, reach out and say, you know, we really admire what you're doing, you're a few steps ahead of us. Any information or support you can give us, or if we can have a chat for half an hour, we'd really appreciate that. There's no harm in asking, and then you can develop that network and develop them as sort of a key contact, which helps you in your organisation move forward. So again, you're not on your own, and learn from others. This is the last slide, I promise, on questions, because there's a lot to think about. But the next element is, how do you want to come across to your audience? Thinking about what you do, why you do it, and who you do it for, and how your audience likes to consume their content and find out about things. How do you want to come across? Are you formal? Are you really funny and witty? Are you really reserved or outlandish? You know, from that research that you've done on your audience, and as Emma says, you know, it could be mums at 2 a.m, it could be, you know, on a daily commute anything, what tone will best engage with them. You think about, another thing to think about is what time of day you normally like to post content. In the morning, you can be really inspiring. Everyone's, quite sluggish, getting ready for the day. You can have some really punchy things. In the evening at 6, 7, 8 o'clock, people are really trying to chill out and have content which sort of just is nice and soft. Think about that when you're thinking about your audience. So you really want to be clear on who you are and who you want your audience to see you as. And don't be someone you're not. If you're not, out there really funny and witty, don't try to be. Be really authentic and be honest and have that own personality. Because having your own personality and that uniqueness that is your organization or the person who is running your content channels is a really strong way to connect with that audience. So I'm going to ask you to make another list again, but make a list of who you are as a person or as an organization, and who you're not. And then again, using that when you're planning your content, you can be really clear on that. You don't have to try and do everything and be everything for everyone. You are you, and you have your mission, and you have your audience, and you just flow from there. So the last one, before I stop talking, what are your goals? So there's got to be a point to all of this that you're doing. There has to be an end goal. So what is it that you're trying to achieve within your business? Are you looking to increase awareness of your activities? In a non-COVID world, are you looking to increase visitors? Are you looking to raise money? Are you looking to recruit volunteers? Have that end goal in mind, because you need to use that in some things that are called call to actions. So we'll come on that later, but normally with every piece of content that you write, you have a sort of thing that you want your audience to do at the end. So if you've done, a really great post on a piece of your collection and the story behind it, do you want them to visit your website to find out more pieces of, more items in the collection? Do you want them to sign up to an activity or a fundraising thing? Give them, if they are interested in you, they're reading your content, they're excited, give them something that they can do next, which feeds into your goals as an organization. So they are there are other questions, and it isn't, in terms of building a visual brand and building the whole thing, but these are the key sort of elements that I'd really like you to have a think about when you are starting to think about who you are and who you want to be sort of in this digital world. So we're just going to know on, and this is a bit off piece, but we're just going to talk about some great brand examples. Now, none of us are trying to be innocent. They are far away from sort of the realm that you're in. But we wanted to talk about innocent because they are always lauded as being that really authentic, really unique brand, because they really have that clear message and that clear mission. They know who they are. They know that they supply health-conscious adults and children worldwide, but the way they do that is their tone of voice, and they've gone through all these stages that I've just talked about, and they know that they are really informal, they're really personal, they're really witty, they're light-hearted, and they're really true to themselves, and they're really authentic. So whenever you, if you ever go and have a look, which I recommend you do, have a look at Innocent on different social media channels, just see how their brand and their mission, their tone of voice really comes together to create something really unique that really hits those target audiences. Emma, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I'll talk about the Merle. This is one of my favourites. So yeah, from the museum sector, the Museum of English Rural Life are a real masterclass in, again, that kind of witty and informal way of conducting social media. And as Emma pointed out, if this isn't you, that's completely fine. But they are a really great example of taking what they do, Anita, you're absolutely right. They get it so right. They're a great example of taking something that on the face of it could be pretty niche and fairly uninteresting for the Twitterverse, and just coming up with a whole personality for their collections. And this is their most famous tweet, I suppose, the one that kind of skyrocketed them to fame and helped them win an award as well, which is they found a photo in their collection of this gigantic sheep, and the tweet is so simple. It just says, "Look at this absolute unit," and it went completely viral. And which doesn't happen very often, by the way. People always have an aspiration to go viral. It doesn't happen very often. There's no point aiming for it. If it happens to you, wonderful, but don't make it an objective, because you're almost certain to fail. But anyway, it happened to them. It went viral. And I think for me, the reason that it works so well is because it absolutely captures two things. It captures a kind of a social media friendly tone of voice. You know, when Twitter isn't being toxic, it's being very playful and it's being very fun and it's full of a lot of silly stuff. So it captures that, but it also really captures the collection and why the staff at the Merle are inspired by their collection. You know, it captures that moment of pulling out a photo and going, "Blooming heck, that is a really big sheep," and it feels so authentic, and that's why it's great. And as Emma says, you know, if this isn't you, that's fine, but authenticity is what's really important. People connect with Innocent and they connect with the Museum of English Rural Life because they feel like there's a person on the other end of the Twitter account or the Facebook account or the Instagram account or whatever. That's what really works. It's that authenticity that really works. So if you want to be more serious, that's totally fine, but you need, if you showcase a bit of your personality, whatever your personality is, you're going to get somewhere. But yeah, the Museum of English Rural Life are brilliant. Leeds Museum and Galleries are also very, very good at this as well. So if you want museum sector examples, they're fantastic. And then another corporate example as well, I absolutely love Yorkshire Tea. Yorkshire Tea are a great social media account.
Yeah, definitely. Because again, I mean, you see the adverts on Yorkshire TV on the television for them. And again, it's just that authenticity. They know who they are, they know what they're trying to say, and they're just saying it, whether it appeals to you or not. They're being their unique self. They're not trying to be anyone else. And again, that's what we're trying to sort of get across here. The next sort of big name, big, top of the tree sort of example that we're just going to use is the Natural History Museum. So what we wanted to show with showing this example is your mission doesn't have to be reams and reams of pages long. You don't have to write, you know, everything that you do. Obviously, you can start with that and filter it down. And this is exactly what the Natural History Museum have done. But their clear mission that they have sort of everywhere, that sort of that is embedded in all the work that they do, is we are creating advocates for the planet. So they're clearly saying that they'll harness their collection, their research to help with this, to help to create advocates for the planet. So everything that they do in their business and in their visitor-facing work is about educating and inspiring. It's about giving those snippets, those videos, those behind the scenes, those bringing things to life. You hear that a lot. We really want to bring things to life and make things relevant for our audiences. So that's what they're trying to do. But you can see how a mission can really help then inform that messaging. So how are you going to create advocates? Well, we need to get people on board, don't we? So let's inspire them, let's educate them, let's bring them along with us. Let's not hide behind our huge, you know, walls and our huge collection and be all, you know, we're behind here and you're out there. They really want to bring everyone with them and bring everyone together to support their clear mission. And again, so they've really thought about that when they've thought about their branding and their tone of voice. They really want to be conversational, They do want to be light, they want to be engaging, but they really want to be friendly, to break down those barriers and to welcome people in, whether that's in person or digitally. So you can see the example here that we've used of one of their sort of little campaigns on Instagram, Die November. You know, things like that, which really connect with those audiences, those younger audiences that might not have traditionally been necessarily interested in the Natural History Museum. They're being fun and they're being playful, but there's a serious side behind it, the serious side of really trying to create those advocates for the planet. So it's time for the breakout exercise. We've thrown a lot of information at you there. There's a lot to think about, but we really wanted to just give you 15 minutes to just take all of that in and have a think about one or two of these topics, whether you want to think about and start to think about your mission, why you do what you do, whether you've got thoughts on your audience, or are really trying to think, yeah, I really want to change up, or I want to see how I come across, and really make that the focus of what we're doing and thinking about how you want to come across to your audience. So yeah, let's start those breakout rooms.
I will start to put everybody into a breakout room now. So you should get a little message that pops up to say join the room. We have about 15 minutes, and when there's about 5 minutes to go, I'll send you a message to give you all a warning. So just give me a couple of seconds to pop you all into a room. We've got 11 people, haven't we? So okay. Okay, you should have your message in a second. There we go. Please let me know if you find yourself not in a room via the chat. Hi, Joanna, can you hear me?
in there.
There she is.
Belinda, sorry, it took a while I didn't realise ask for help meant invite you in.
That's fine. I wasn't sure whether you were okay. So as long as you're all okay. I'm not sure if we're able to record the breakout rooms at the moment.
I've tried, but it says please
Yeah.
ask the host to give you permission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to try again quickly? Press record.
Yeah.
And see if it didn't ask me to give you permission.
No, it still says please ask the host to give you
Yeah, it
permission.
doesn't seem to be allowing us to do that. We've had this issue before with sport and heritage webinars. So apologies for that. The main part of the session is being recorded.
Yeah, I don't think you can record breakout rooms. I've had that on sessions I've led, and you've not been able to.
Yeah, it's annoying, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure why. I'm not sure. Well, anyway, they'll no doubt come to it at some point and add that in.
And you won't need any more grains.
Hang on.
I think Jeff wanted to.
Yeah. Jeff, would you like to ask a question? Or
Well, I was just waving at my wife, actually, who was starting to say something, telling her that if she wanted to speak, I needed to put myself on mute. But since I'm on, I don't know if this is this would be helpful for people, but you were asking what people's challenges are at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm involved with an online presence to do with football heritage, and we're trying to connect people, supporter groups really, from different clubs to share advice on good ways of saving heritage and structures for doing that. And we've set up a website, and there's a newsletter we send out every couple of months, and we have a Twitter presence. But my goodness me, Twitter's hard work. Coming up with ideas for things to say, and then, you know, getting any sort of reaction at all. I mean, really, we want people to sign up to the newsletter on the website so that we're controlling the communication to them, rather than chucking stuff out there on Twitter and, you know, maybe some of it sticks, maybe somebody even likes it, but that probably doesn't mean anything whatsoever. You know, maybe we get 20 likes. Is that good? Is it bad? You know, it's all it's all just noise, it seems. So tips and tricks for anything around attracting, making tweets look.
Well, we're going to get into that a bit later, but one of the things, again, when it comes back to that clarity and key messages, one of the most stress relieving things is to think about how to make your content work really hard for you. So instead of sending just one tweet out, which is, you know, brilliant, how can you actually take a step back and think about the topics or questions, or, you know, benefits is a weird word for that, but what is it that what is your unique selling point or question, or you know, you say you're trying to get support together, so can you do some long form or big questions on, you know, 5 ways to, you know, support us, or 5 ways to support local X, Y, and Z. And if you have that as a long form content, you can write, like you say, you've got a newsletter, you can write newsletters about that, you can write blogs about that. Blog is a really good thing to have on your website because it helps Google to trawl. Yeah, it helps if you have keywords in there and you have more information about what you do. Google picks it up a bit more, so you're more likely to, you know, if someone searches to come up there. But then when you've got all that long form content all written out, that makes you come across as more of that expert, or gives more of that story. You know, we talked about personality and your uniqueness of what you do. You can then filter that. So one blog post and all that text can go down into, you know, however many you want Instagram posts or tweets, and it can become really strategic. So you could have different long form content that sort of keeps people going through that journey of where you're trying to get to with your goal of getting people signed up to the newsletter, or getting people to network with you and show that support. So if you come up with those key things at the top and do that long form and then short form content, it just makes it easier that you're not then just writing one tweet that you're really hoping, as you say, will get out there and stick and get loads of likes. You're actually building more of that strategy. And if you have those calls to action that we've sort of mentioned, that is saying, you know, be really clear with people with what you want them to do. They're not, you know, they're not psychic. If you really want them to sign up to things, you know, make it really exciting that they should sign up for it. You know, we call things, there's things like lead magnets and incentives. Can you give them a little freebie or a story or access to something that makes them go, yeah, I really want that. But if I want that, I have to sign up to the newsletter. It's just these different sales techniques there for you. So yeah, I think there was something else, but my brain's gone. Was that helpful?
Yes. I mean, we do actually have a blog, so I have taken to, you know, flagging that in all the tweets that I send.
Yeah.
But
I suppose it's about, even if it's not even just linking it, it could be that you change the format or take the key point of the blog and make that into 3 or 4 posts that then say,
I think it's getting the cut through that is sort of the issue that's looming largest really for us.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing that we hear a lot is, you know, don't get too hung up on followers and likes, and that's really hard not to do, again, as a new business owner. That's what you're looking for, but it's more about the quality of the audience that you have. So really taking care of, even how small it is, talking to that audience and making sure they're more connected with you, and then that sort of branches out potentially in more loyalty, or they share things, because we're often chasing ahead of people that we haven't quite got yet. But if you really nurture that audience that you do have, that can help. But yeah, there isn't any sort of magic wand that just goes, there you go, all your audiences are there for you. But if you just keep sort of being that consistent and having that real clarity of what your mission is and what your content is trying to do, both as a benefit to your audience but also helping you achieve your goals in your organization, then it helps with that clarity of message.
So Emma, would you recommend even repackaging old content? You know, if you're struggling to create new stuff for Twitter all the time.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the main
old blog posts or anything.
Yeah, so repurposing content is a massive part of what you see people do all the time online. To just change things up. Did something really work for you a few months ago, a few weeks ago? Is there a new angle you could put on it? Or can you just make it look a bit, if it's visual on Instagram, can you just do a different, you know, image or graphic with it? But, or even link back and say, you know, you were really interested in this a few months ago. This is, you know, what's changed since, or we've added this to it. Or yeah, really repurposing your content again takes a bit of that stress away, but it also shows you as that authority in your field. Yeah.
How do you feel about using images on Twitter as well? I mean, I know it's not an image-based platform, but again, more likely to get engagement if there's a photo post.
Again, it's not necessarily about the channel, it's about that audience that you have with it, or what you're trying to put out. So if you're a really visual organization or you know, collector, and your whole point is, I've got all these images of these old, I don't know, football matches or whatever we're talking about, you know, you could do a whole series on caption this, or, you know, as Emma showed you, that sort of fun side of things. You know, are there ways that instead of just going, look, we found this image, it's dated da 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 da, you know, could you do something where you caption it? Can you post it at a seasonal point, you know, in the year, at their key, like, national day, you know, all these random days. I think there's a coffee day and there's everything on every day of the year. How can you jump onto those little trends that could just bring a little smile or a laugh, go, oh yeah, okay, yeah. But again, it's being authentic to you. Don't try and do things that other people are doing if it doesn't feel like you personally. The best brands and the best businesses show their own unique personality, and show the person behind the business. There's an example that we've put in a bit later. Again, it's the Natural History Museum, but you kind of think, oh, these are these big organisations, or you have this, this fancy title, you have the National Trust or whatever your title. There's still an individual at the other end on a laptop writing the tweets, or that voice for that organisation. Feel like you're talking person to person, not necessarily organisation to organisation, and have a bit of that familiarity. Again, there are places where you have to be really formal, but just find out and try and think about who you are to bring that across a little bit, I'd say.
Thank you.
But the other thing I think what I was going to say is, if you think about different forms of content, so tweets last the shortest because people's feeds are just constantly filling up. So when you post something, a few minutes to an hour to a day later, it's gone unless someone goes onto your particular page.
Yeah.
With Instagram, it's like 24 hours. Again, with their stories, they last 24 hours. With your grid, it's a bit longer. I think Facebook is even a little bit longer still, but that's where that long form sort of blog, newsletter, blogs can sort of live forever if people are searching for them. If you link them back to Pinterest, again, something that we're going to say later is, don't jump on to every channel because you can't maintain it. You don't have the resource or the energy to do it. But I'm just saying there's different ways. But if you think about the lifespan of that content, your long form content and other things will last longer than tweets. But tweets are brilliant. I'm not saying that Twitter isn't great. I'm just sort of saying in terms of the length of how visible your content is. Yes.
Can I just ask what you think about, I guess it depends on how many people you've got engaging, but on responding to people. So, when you get an engagement, how important is it to always reply? Because Twitter and any kind of social media is all consuming. You could be doing it all day and all night, but in terms of if you ask people to engage with you, the importance of actually responding to that response.
Yeah, so there's two ways to think about it. Is do whatever you can do. Don't break your back over it. If you've got half an hour a day or half an hour a week, that is the resource that you have for it. And if you're consistent in that way, your viewers, followers will know that you're consistent in that way. The thing at the moment that's really rubbing people up the wrong way is all these, you call the algorithms, all the behind the scenes things that go on, like Instagram at the moment. It's constantly changing their algorithm and making it really harder for your things to be seen online. And they say, well, if you respond to your DM straight away, or make sure you comment back to every comment that you have, Instagram gods all really like that because you're always on the app. The more you're on the app, the more, and that's not healthy. It's not, I'm with the camp of have the resource that you are, be consistent in that with your followers. And if you want, I think you can set, even on your DMs, you can sort of set a message that says, we aim to respond to you within, this window of time. So yeah, do what you can do. And if you, want to do more, you can make that a priority. But yeah, don't kill yourself over it. Because again, it's a new business. Sorry, just drank that the wrong way. Instagram has started to take up too much of my life, and that whole consistency thing. Because you really care. You think, oh, I have to post every day or every 2 days, but people don't see that. They just see their feed. They don't go, oh, you know what? They haven't I haven't seen anything new from them today. They're not working very hard or doing anything there. It's just about being sort of consistent on what's as stress-free for you. If you want to post once a week, then choose a day for it, and then people might go, oh, you know what, that might, you know, come up on this Friday. You know, just do what feels best for you. That was a very long-winded way of saying. Has anyone got any other questions before we've
got about a minute. I'm going to close the rooms in a minute, and there'll be a 60-second.
Well, we've got the Q&As at the end, and the second half is all about sort of marketing channels and other things. So your questions might get answered there. But I just want to say, even though, you know, it's quite heavy, all the branding stuff, and again, brand is quite a weird concept. It's just about that clarity, and instead of going head in into going, this is what I want to say, and I'm just going to put it out there, just take those steps, those steps back, and have that sort of list and that clarity of things about why you're doing what you want to be doing, what that end goal is, who your audiences are, what your sort of value, what you're giving to that audience to make them connect with you. When you have all of that sort of written down and nailed, it just makes it so much easier to then communicate more effectively. Yeah.
Thanks, Emma. Right, I'll see some of you back in the main room in a second. Just got a very late comment. Okay, I'll just give everybody a few seconds to come back in. I think that's everybody. Yeah, we're at 15, aren't we? Okay, Brill. So I'm going to mute myself now and hand it back over to Emma and Emma.
I will share my screen again.
Lovely. So the second half of this session really is about, and I don't know about you, Emma, but we touched on a fair bit of this during the breakout sessions, is starting to look more at your communications and your marketing. And you know, if you think back to that, one of the first slides we showed you that had the kind of your brand at the top, and then your communications, and creating your, you know why you're doing what you're doing, and who you want to be talking to, and now it's the doing, as it were. So planning is always the place to start. It's really easy, especially with social media and with digital platforms, to jump right in, and I think the message I would always give is to plan. By all means, jump right in, try some things out and see what happens, but having a plan is a good place to be. So you've done a couple of them already. You've outlined your mission and your audience. You've maybe the one thing again to understand is to look at your audience's journey, and I think this is where online research can really help you. We haven't covered too much of where to find different demographics and different types of people in this presentation, honestly, because it's a very meaty subject area, and you could probably run a whole seminar session on it by itself. But in terms of who's where, you know, who's using Facebook, who's using Twitter, who's using Instagram, there's an awful lot of resources online. So if you know you're trying to reach X bracket, you're trying to reach between 40 and 55, career driven, whoever, have a look online and do your research on where they are and what platforms they're using. The next thing is to write your key messages. So you've got your mission statement, your kind of organizational mission statement for what you're trying to achieve. Out of that can fall your key messages. So what are you trying to say specifically? So for example, you may have objectives around both visitor driving and fundraising. And your key messages for both of those is probably going to be different. And your key messages for different audiences might well be different. So your key fundraising message may be around having a nationally or internationally significant collection, It may be about your collection being under risk at times like these. Unfortunately, it could well be about struggling to carry on in during the coronavirus crisis, you know, but they are going to be completely different from your visitor driving messages, and you may want to target your fundraising messages to particular audiences. For example, you might want to go down a gifts in wills route rather than a general fundraising route. So having a think about from your mission statement and from your whys and what you're trying to do, what are you then trying to say to people? So your mission is more kind of internal, it's more what you would say to each other. Your key messages are what you're going to say to your audience. The next point is really to consider your resources and your time. We're well aware as we give this presentation that probably most of you are not able to spend all of your time on comms and marketing, and that is absolutely fine. There are a huge, particularly in heritage, there's a huge range of split roles and people doing everything, let alone one thing. So have a think about what resource and what time do you have to give to this, and whatever you have, that's fine. Just make the most of what you have. If you have half an hour a week to spend on marketing, yes, perhaps in an ideal world you'd have more, but you don't, then that's fine. Just use that half an hour as effectively as you possibly can. And that probably comes down to, rather than trying to do 3 things, maybe do 1 thing, maybe focus all your energy on that thing because you've only got half an hour a week. Outline your channels. Channels are going to come next. Channels is just our kind of marketing jargon for where you're putting your stuff, whether it's on your website, on your blog, on your, you know, whether you are reaching out to the media, and so on. And of course, the last thing is to develop a bit of a plan of action. What are you going to do and when? Coming back briefly to audiences, we wanted to flag with you the audience journey. We talk a lot in kind of marketing and comms terms around a funnel, which is the graphic that you can see before you. So there are a huge range of people out there as everybody. You've narrowed that down already by saying, okay, I don't necessarily want to talk to the general public. I want to talk to these specific people. Your desire then should be about trying to move people down this funnel, but with the understanding that as you move people down the funnel, there will be fewer and fewer of them. So for your general audience, the first thing you're trying to get is awareness, right? The first thing you're trying to get is reach. You're trying to get people who know that you're there and pay a bit of attention to you. As you move people through that journey, you'll get quite a lot of people staying on for the interest side of things. This is really when, you know, they're not just kind of clocking you as a local attraction in the area and, oh yeah, I think there's a museum about, you know, there's a museum about squash somewhere in the town. They're then moving into, do you know what, actually, I used to play squash as a kid. Do you know what, maybe I've got a bit of an interest in that. The desire can come across in many different ways. It might be a desire to help and support you. It might be a desire to visit. Moving into action, which is when they actually start to do those things. And loyalty is your real, they're your gems. They're your regular visitors. They're your regular donors, regular funders, the people who proactively come to you and say, I want to help. But so yeah, you're trying to move people down the funnel as you engage with them. But as I say, retain that understanding that you're never going to get everybody to the end. And it's fine if some people just stick at awareness the whole time, that's absolutely fine. But what you're looking for is a core group of really engaged members, visitors, funders who are there to support you and who are proactively interested in your goals. And they might turn into volunteers, they might turn into members of staff. But that's the kind of the audience funnel and the journey that you're looking to take people on. So this slide is probably worth revisiting when we send the slides around afterwards. There is a lot here, but when you're looking to create content to take your audience on this journey and ask that question that we asked a little while ago about, so what, who cares, why should I be interested in this? Again, you're trying to move people down that funnel, but you can do it in a multitude of ways. So coming back to your lists that you made earlier, what are the different ways that you can make people aware and make people interested, and what will make them do the thing that you want them to do? So there are a multitude of ways you can approach this. You can look to inspire and entertain. We talked a bit about entertainment with our brand examples earlier, particularly with Innocent. They're just looking for kind of brand awareness and the biggest reach possible. So they're really looking to entertain people. Inspiration might be something that particularly applies to you, because you know you have this fantastic collection and you know you have this fantastic story to tell, and you really want to get people as inspired about it as you are. You might be looking to educate. Yes, particularly if you have a schools program, but education, as we all know, goes a lot beyond formal education. And you may be looking to connect with people, and connection is really when you get down to the bottom bits of the funnel. Connection is about that emotional engagement, that heartfelt feeling that you care about this organization. So when you're connecting with people, you know that you've got them to the near the bottom of the funnel. So that's when people really start to understand your mission. That's when they start to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. Carry on. So we're going to spend a bit of time talking about types of content, and then we'll come on to our channels. As I say, in this presentation, we have focused on digital content. The reason for that, essentially, is that we've worked in heritage ourselves, and we're well aware that budgets tend to operate on a shoestring. So your digital content, by and large, all it costs is your time. That's not quite true for everything. We'll talk about kind of email marketing and so on in a bit, and obviously you can do advertising on social media, but by and large your digital content is something that you can do for free, and that's why we focused on digital today. So you have your kind of longer forms of content. Probably your longest form of content is your website, but we're also talking about blogs, newsletters, your video content, and your email content. And this is where you can really dig in. You can really get into a topic. This is for where, this is really for your audiences who've been through that journey of inspiration and now at that connection point with you. They know they want to find out more about you, and they know they want to spend 5 or 10 minutes reading a blog post about something, because you've taken them on a journey where they're passionate about what you do. So you can do many things here. You can dig deep into your content, but you can also show your own expertise and show why your value is so important. Whether you're a volunteer, a member of staff, whatever, so much, and this is your opportunity to show that off, really. And you can also connect people with what you're doing. It can be a really great way to include those calls to action that Emma was talking about. You can take people on a journey through an email where you tell them a story, and at the end of it, you might be making a fundraising ask. It might be that you're trying to acquire a new piece for the collection, and you tell them why it's so important. At the end, you're asking for donations. So fundraising is an easier example, but it might be that you've got a new exhibition, virtual or physical, and you're taking people on that journey of why it's so exciting and why it's so interesting, maybe highlighting a couple of the flagship pieces or the flagship stories, and your call to action is to visit it. So your long form content really allows you to do that. Your short form content, you can do the same things, you've just got to be a lot snappier. So you obviously have Instagram, Facebook and Twitter are kind of your core channels, and these are your real short bursts of content that are about inspiring people. They're also about engaging and kick-starting that conversation and getting people wanting to talk to you and communicate back with you. As Emma said, it really is a two-way conversation on social media, and you want to create that engagement with that community. You want them to feel like they can respond to your posts and reply to you. So that's kind of how your short form content really works. We've just picked a couple of examples to show you these different types of content in action. again, picking up on the Natural History Museum, which we talked about earlier. And they utilize all of these, as many big brands do. So they do have a blog that again picks up on their mission. Emma talked about their key mission to create advocates for the planet, and pretty much all of their content really ties into that. So you can see some highlights from their blog there. One about climate change, about getting eco-friendly at Christmas. Obviously, blogs are great for kind of topical time of year type content. And then in the bottom left there, you can see a news item around the work of the Natural History Museum scientists to identify new species, which ties into their key message, but also emphasises their own expertise and the reason why their staff and funding their staff is so important. The grid is Instagram grids that we'll come back to when we talk about Instagram. Although I'm about to, so if you see the middle graphic is a snapshot of the Natural History Museum's Instagram feed, and that's the kind of grid that we're talking about. When you take Instagram content all in a look at someone's profile page rather than clicking on an individual post, and that grid together should really again help to tell that story, that overall story of who you are and what you do. And finally, on the right, you have another example. If you're paying attention to the examples I'm picking out today, you'll know that I really enjoy silly social media content. So, so this is from a couple of years ago, but it's a really nice example of, again, just showing the personality behind the social media accounts. A member of the public asked the Science Museum and the Natural History Museum who would win in a fight, and they both absolutely dove into the conversation. It became a fight between dinosaurs, robots, Spitfires and Poisons, and it was just it's a really nice way for people to just be a bit daft. It's also why I still really enjoy Twitter, even though it can be a not so nice place to be sometimes. It comes back to everything we were saying earlier, but I think the other thing is you know, this is the Science Museum and the Natural History Museum talking to each other in a kind of a jokey, bit of a bantery kind of way. Twitter is also great for networking in lots of other ways. You can just have chats between, you know, everyone on this call works in sporting heritage. So actually you are the start of a great network. And if you're talking to each other and talking about your collections and sharing some of that inspiration, your audiences will join in. They just might need a bit of encouragement to get there. So if you can start that conversation among yourselves, that could be a really great way to get your audience involved in that two-way engagement.
Yeah, that's really great, Emma.
Cool. So how to reach your audience? The first point comes back to what I was talking about earlier. So if you need to know where your audience is spending most of their time, and that comes back to what I was saying earlier, do your research. There is stacks, absolutely stacks from a quick Google search. If you look for what demographics use, insert social media channel here, what demographics use Twitter, what demographics use Facebook, you will find so much. So if you need a better understanding of that, just Google it. You will find out so much information. And you know, in our breakout group, we talked a little bit about older audiences as well, and it is one of the things I'd be keen to myth bust a little bit, is that you will find your older audiences on social media, not to quite the same extent as you might a younger audience, but there is a big uptake from older audiences. We're being pushed for time. So yeah, do your research. As I said earlier, create content that appeals to your audience. Make sure you're making your content mobile friendly. This is a really big one. It's just a few hacks and tips really, but now more than 50% of content is viewed on mobiles. So make sure your videos and your images are the right size, and look into what's the right way to, whether you shoot landscape or portrait, depends on what platform you're using. So just have a look into that. and stay consistent. Talked earlier about authenticity. Authenticity is really important. So given that we've only got a little bit of time and we're making room for a Q&A at the end, I'm going to absolutely whiz through some channels. And as we say, the presentation will be shared afterwards. So don't worry if you don't catch all of this in one go.
Sorry, everyone, I spent too long at the start.
Completely fine. So Instagram, the main pro I would say is that, you know, its visualness does lend itself really well to what you do. And it's relatively easy to grow organically. It makes big use of hashtags, and that's a good way to kind of broaden out your audience. Main cons is that it does require time and resource, and it is very visual. So if for any reason, I know we were talking about the Nottinghamshire Cricket Club collection, and that you don't necessarily have many objects, so actually you might not feel like you have enough pictures to put on there. So yeah, it is a very visual platform, which can be a benefit and a negative. Facebook. Main thing about Facebook is really flexibility. You can do all sorts. You can host events, you can create private groups, you can do a lot. But I would say that it's great for the audiences that use it, but there is an increasing skepticism about Facebook. And it's quite interesting really, because Facebook own Instagram and they own WhatsApp and whatever, but a lot of the skepticism around Facebook, and particularly Facebook advertising, does sit within Facebook itself. And to grow, you really need to advertise. So it may not be the right one for you, but it is great for some of your core audiences. And this is where you find some of your older audiences. It's also where you find some of your millennials who were kind of the first to adopt Facebook. Twitter, my personal fave. I'd say networking is a really good platform for networking. It's very topical. So again, working in a sports industry, there's a lot of topical content that you guys can pick up on with all the major sports fixtures in the year, and don't be afraid to use those moments to your advantage. The flip side of that is that everyone's talking about those moments, so you can get lost in the crowd. But equally, you know, if you're not talking about your I'm sorry, Steve, I'm going to pick on you. If you're not talking about your cricket club during the Ashes or during, you know, X major contest, then you probably should be. Cons are it's very fast paced. There's, you know, you can easily get lost on Twitter. The other con is it can be horrible, but by and large people are quite nice. Just ignore the bots. Blogging is a really, if you, as I say, this is you're probably using your social media channels, your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, to drive people through to your blog, and that's probably it was one of the cons we didn't actually put on there, but it's potentially one of the cons is that if you're just writing a blog without telling people it's there, nobody's seeing it. So it does require a bit of extra work, but as we said earlier, allows you to establish your expertise and really engage the people that you know are coming down that funnel in the audience journey. Email, this is a really important one that we haven't really touched on yet. You do need to pay for it, it's true. You'll need a platform like MailChimp or ConvertKit or Flowdesk, but compared to other forms of advertising, particularly traditional forms of advertising like newspaper advertising, it's pretty cheap. And again, the examples are the main advantages are that you are dealing with your subscribers. So yes, you've had to work a bit to get them to subscribe, but once they're subscribed, they're probably fairly interested and fairly keen to hear what you have to say. So you can help again to move your audience down that funnel. The cons are you know how many emails you get and you know how many you don't open. So it can be competitive to actually get people to open them. And for anyone who's looking for a kind of a Gen Z audience, a sub 25 years old audience, they hate email in the way that millennials hate the phone. So if you are looking particularly for that younger audience, it's probably not the right place for you.
I think we can
summary then. Oh, we're going to skip the summary. Well, you don't need a summary.
I think we want to get to the Q&As. I mean, the summary is...
Yeah, no, let's go on to the Q&A. And as I say, the main message that we want to say, I think, is actually on the next slide. And again, I talked about this with my breakout group. Oh, the next slide. is we've talked about a lot in the last hour and a half, and it can feel really daunting, but the main way you learn is by doing. So as much as we say to plan, and planning is really important, and give it that thought, talk about it with your colleagues, talk about it with your audiences, talk about it with your family, and make a plan. That is really important, but also just get going and try something. Don't feel like you need to be across every platform. You really don't, especially if you're time poor. If you know you've only got that limited amount of time, choose one thing and try and do it really well. And it probably will be a social media account, because as I say, you're putting in an extra step with blogging and with email. You've got to get people to sign up or get people to subscribe. So it probably will be a social media platform. Pick one that you know your audiences are on and try and do it well and give it a go. So onto the Q&A. Where would you go to read and learn more about using social media in particular to attract new audiences? I might hand this over to you, Emma, if that's okay.
Sorry, I was just sorting out the screen thing. I haven't actually had access to the chat, so let me just have a look.
So the question is, where would you go to read and learn more about using social media in particular to attract new audiences?
Again, it sounds too obvious, but Google and blogs. I mean, there's so much information out there, and because so many people are asking the question, there's so many people out there willing to provide the answer for you. So depending on your your sector, your sport, there could be stuff out there, but Pinterest is a really good way, because Pinterest isn't a social media channel. It is a search engine. It's just a really visual search engine, but it's where a lot of people actually post their blogs too. So if you ask that question in Pinterest, you will find a lot of different blogs, and just sift through them and find different, again, it's that competitor thing, or different people in your area or experts on those channels. You can find different people. You just have to look for it. You could type into Instagram, hashtag Instagram expert or something like that, and you can find people, again, that are giving you loads of different tips on there. But unfortunately, as someone who's going through it after being made redundant and building a business over the last 4 months, it is that consistency and perseverance. It is a slow growth. You are not going to get 1,000 followers overnight, but just keep iterating, but be really clear on that message and what that benefit is and that value is, that people actually take notice of it and feel interested to follow and do it. So there are quite a lot of things that you can do, but the main thing is, unfortunately, time and consistency and perseverance.
Yeah, definitely. The next question I think is a great one. Thank you, Lucy. How regular or frequent do you think communications need to be to keep people connected with you? My answer to this would be twofold, really. One is that there's nothing worse than a dormant social media account. You do need to be posting regularly. I would say probably a couple of times a week at a minimum. But the flip side of that, I would say, is be consistent. If you post once a week and you know you can only post once a week, then do that, but be consistent. The worst thing is to kind of do a whole flurry of stuff, get people excited, and then leave it for a month. So I would say, yes, you need to be communicating frequently, and I would definitely try to make it a frequency a week, preferably a couple of times a week. If you can, I would say there's almost never a need to kind of post every day. If you post every other day is probably an optimum if you can. But if you're posting every day,
just to jump in there, it's kind of the average. They say the minimum is 3 times a week, which again is like almost once every other day. Again, it's about your audience. With sport, is the weekend the best time? For me, I'm I'm a weekday one, so mine are all in the week. But think about that. Do you want to have a few at the weekend and think of it as a 7-day piece? Yes, you might not be working and engaging at that time, but it might be the best time for your audience.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I would say actually don't post too much. It can put people off and you're probably going to run out of things to say. So yeah, 2 to 3 times a week if you can. If not, just be consistent. And also that's with kind of shorter form content. I know the question was about social media, but just to touch on blogs and emails and things, I would say once every 2 weeks at a max, particularly for email. So can we all share our social media details so we can follow and support each other? I think that's an absolutely brilliant idea. Absolutely brilliant idea. You are each other's best asset, and you're also, you know, the people that you can talk to get some tips as well, because you'll all have different experiences. Once I've defined my audience and the platform they use, what are the top techniques to actually grow that audience? So I think, Emma, you covered this really well when you said give it time and be patient. It can be one of the hardest things, particularly if you've got people to report back to who maybe don't understand social media so well.
Yeah. The things that I would add to that, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but the other thing is the engagement side of it. Optimally, you are supposed to, again, if you really want to bow down to the algorithm gods, is to actively engage with your followers, comment, like 20 minutes before you post and 20 minutes after. That can really help just warm everything up, and for some reason with Instagram and other things, it can help your reach of your post. The other great tool is insights that we haven't mentioned, but on all of these channels, especially if you have a business account, you'll have access to insights which show you your best performing posts. So you're looking at things like how many likes, comments, and the big things actually at the moment are share and send. So who is sending your content to their own, this is on Instagram, but sending your content to their stories so that their followers can then see your content, and who's actually saving your content, your tips, your value, your inspiration, something that's caught their eye for future use. They're the really golden tickets are saved. So really use your insights and see what worked and what didn't. Drop what isn't working and do more of what is. So again, with the whole consistency, trying things, posting things, looking at those different, we showed you those sort of content pillars, change it up maybe. So those 3 posts a week, one is an educate, one is an inspire, and one is a connect, and just see what's working out there. Definitely.
And I think it's such a good point you make about engaging as well, Emma, that like I think certainly when I first started using social media, I definitely only thought about broadcasting, and it really is about that two-way conversation.
It definitely is, yeah. And always do respond to your comments or your DMs, because yeah, it's all about building that connection. You know, we've talked about, even with the Natural History Museum, you think you're behind all these big walls, or not, it's a person there, and you want to have that communication. So yeah, don't just broadcast and think people, because why, if you ask that question, why would people like and comment on your things if you're not doing the same for them? You know, it's that two-way street thing.
Definitely. So probably the last one we've got time for, because we are running over ever so slightly, is can you explain a little bit more about, or offer tips for how to convert audiences to mailing list subscriptions, particularly where they can be deeper engaged with you because they've decided or chosen to opt into that deeper engagement, embrace what you do? Yeah, so I think the main things are, you'll know from signing up, I imagine, to kind of your own newsletters and things, is make sure that you've got it clearly on your website. A sign up box, if you don't mind pop-ups, then a pop-up box is a really effective way to get people to sign up and subscribe. There are also, you know, big brands use incentives to sign up and subscribe, discounts on things, entry into a competition, and so on. You might not feel like that's fully appropriate for you, but something like a competition could work. Is even, you know, it doesn't have to be anything that actually has a financial prize at the end of it. It could be a competition for the best drawing of a ski slope. You know, it doesn't. It could be particularly like family friendly things can work quite well for that. But yeah, I would definitely say make sure it's really clear on your website that you have a newsletter and how to subscribe. Think about a pop-up box because it does work. and make sure you're mentioning it. Just it sounds so obvious, but you know, at the end of your blog posts, make sure you're talking about subscribing to the newsletter to find out when the next blog is published, and on your social media channels. Don't go on about it relentlessly because people will get bored, but just every so often make sure you've put in a tweet. We haven't put in a post on whatever platform. We haven't talked about scheduling, but you can use platforms like TweetDeck, Hootsuite and so on to pre-schedule your posts. Just every so often make sure you're mentioning your newsletter and provide a link to go and subscribe. You know, when you do physical in-person events, if we're ever allowed to do them again, on your evaluation forms that you probably have, make sure there's an option to sign up to the newsletter. It's a relentless slow burn, I would say, with things like newsletters. And then you don't just want them to subscribe, you want them to stay subscribed. So actually part of the real challenge is making sure that your emails itself are really engaging, good content, that people are opening them and engaging with them, and that they're forwarding them on to their friends and family and so on, because it's all very well getting the numbers signing up, but if they're then unsubscribing within a month, you've got a problem. So yeah, focus on the ones you have, I would say, and make sure that they're really good content.
I would just add to that, when you are promoting your newsletter or whatever, again, not too much information, but give a quirky tagline that gives the benefit. If you just say sign up, well, people say, well, what's in it for me? Again, think about your audience. What do they actually want to get from you, and name some of those benefits in just a really short sentence of this is all the goodness that you're going to get from this newsletter. Definitely.
So I think that brings us to the end of the presentation. I know everyone's been sharing their details, which is amazing. I don't know if Kate or Belinda, maybe you could grab them all from the chat and send them out to everyone via email or something.
Yeah, I've made a note, so I'll circulate that with the PowerPoints.
Awesome, thank you. So thanks everyone. Apologies that we ran over by 7 minutes or so, but you'll get the presentation afterwards, and I hope that was a useful session and an enjoyable one.
Yes, thank you very much for listening to us speak, and we do really hope that was really useful, and it's given you lots of ideas on how to move forward in this new 2021.
And from Kate and I, if you keep following Supporting Heritage on Twitter, you'll be able to find out about any of the further sessions that we've got planned. So there are 2 more as part of our digital skills series on the 14th and 21st. So it'll be great to see some of you there as well if you want to sign up for those. They're free and you can sign up via Eventbrite.